While it is a variant of the Cavalier class and fulfills a very similar role to many other martial type classes, the Samurai offers up a unique feel as well as some interesting options that just aren't available to the Cavalier or many other classes. So, let's take a look at a pretty solid way for building one in 1st edition Pathfinder. Hello everyone, and welcome back down here to the Gamer's Den with me, your host, Jordan, your Master of Lore and Storyteller Extraordinaire, here to start another guide for a class in 1st edition Pathfinder. Today, taking a look at the Samurai, and we're going to be building our Brave Fencer to be overall very effective. Not game-breakingly broken, but still, something that's going to be interesting, thematic, definitely effective, and should be able to pass for most any game that you might find yourself at. Whatever the table, whatever your DM, if they're allowing the Samurai class, it should go over well. But the Samurai is interesting in that when it first came out, and for a while after, a lot of people questioned why it was its own alternate class at all, because essentially it's the Cavalier. This should have been an archetype, was the argument a lot of people made, and I can see that, I can understand that, and certainly it wouldn't have hurt my feelings any if this had been made an archetype. But I feel that there's enough distinct options here, as well as just an overall very thematic feel to the class overall that makes it thoroughly distinct from the Cavalier, and I think that's worth exploring. And so we'll be going into that today when we start exploring the ancestry you want to go with, the traits, as well as the general stat array that you want to build, and maybe some historical tidbits in there overall. But before we get into all of that, if you're new here to the channel, go on down there, hit the subscribe button, and become a regular member here at the Gamer's Den. Or if you've already gone on ahead and listed yourself on such an incredible roster of legendary heroes, then go on down to hit the like button and share the video far and wide. But now, let's start talking about the Samurai, and the first choice is picking out your ancestry. And to start with, they're a classic, they show up on every guide and will probably be in every guide from here on out. It's humans, the baseline pick for any class. You gain a +2 bonus to any stat, an extra feat, extra skill ranks at 1st level and every level thereafter. Also, given that the Samurai is supposed to be an alternate option for the Cavalier, I believe the favored class bonus that humans get as a bonus to the banner bonus overall should apply, but if it doesn't, then having extra hit points or skill ranks each level as you choose and select at each level will be just fine. Not as good as getting a bonus to the bonus that your banner provides, an increase to that, but still not bad. Then, following on their heels are the Suli. Suli are the result of pairings between Jan and mortals. So, Ifrit, Janai, all these different kinds of creatures, they result in Suli. Now, Suli gain a +2 bonus to strength and charisma while taking a -2 penalty to intelligence. Given the stat array that we're going to go with, this suits us just fine. But in addition to that, you gain a 5 resistance bonus to acid, cold, electricity, and fire damage overall, and especially at early levels, that's huge, but even continuing on to further and higher levels, that is still going to be incredibly helpful for you to have. Then you also gain a +2 bonus on diplomacy and sense motive skill checks, which is great because diplomacy is one of the most useful face skills in the game, and sense motive, well, that's just handy for picking up on when people are trying to be deceptive with you. And diplomacy is a class skill for the Samurai, so if you wanted to alter this build and lean a little bit more into charisma, well, that's going to fit just fine, and it's still going to be fairly thematic overall and fit with the more historical notions of what samurai were like and what they were. Then, in addition, you also gain the ability for once a day as a swift action, grant yourself an extra 1d6 damage that's either acid, cold, electric, or fire damage, chosen when you activate this ability. And it will apply to your natural attacks or wielded weapons, and last for 1 round a level. That's huge, and normally I don't rate fire damage as this high, but given that this ability allows you to pick between one of the four, you can apply this to whatever fight you might be in and target a specific creature's vulnerability. Now, to cap things off, for the favored class bonus, well, you don't really get a class-specific one, so you're left with either selecting an extra hit point or skill rank at each level. But still, not bad options for a class that's going to definitely need its hit points and may end up being a little bit starved for skill ranks if you find yourself needing some extra. And then lastly, it's an interesting option, but one that fits pretty well. It's the Dwarf. Now, dwarves gain a +2 bonus to their Constitution and Wisdom scores while taking a -2 hit to Charisma. Now, getting a bonus to Constitution, that's your Fortitude saves, that's extra hit points, that's all perfect for us. And a bonus to Wisdom means that our Will save score is not going to be quite so bad, and that will boost a couple of skills as well. The -2 to Charisma does hurt, but it's offset by the fact that you're going to get Dark Vision out to 60 feet. Gain a +4 armor class bonus against the giant subtype of creatures, which includes ogres and trolls and, well, a whole different array of giants. You're also going to gain a +2 bonus on saves versus poison, spells, and spell-like abilities, which again stacks really nicely with your will save. And then you also gain a +4 combat maneuver defense bonus against bull rush and trip attacks, which are common enough. You also gain a +1 attack bonus versus goblins and orcs. You become proficient with battle axes, heavy picks, and warhammers, which does expand your options, but may not be the thing that you go with. And while goblins and orcs may be fairly common enemies in standard fare early on, they're going to quickly become fairly eclipsed by other enemy types unless your campaign is focused on specifically dealing with them. Now, all the way around, the Dwarf does make for a pretty interesting option for you overall. Then, going on from your Ancestry, we come over to our stat array that we want to pick from. And overall, when you take a look at this here, you can see pretty readily that we're leaning straight into Strength. That's our method of hitting your targets as well as dealing damage, so boosting that is going to be essential. Constitution is going to be the next most important, again for the Fortitude saves, which are good for the Samurai, as well as extra hit points all the way around there. Charisma is also a good stat for us to have. And then, again, because that feeds into a number of different class skills. Then we have Dexterity and Wisdom in following in their importance. I would lean more towards Dexterity myself, just for at least a little bit of a boost to our reflex saves, as well as to initiative, and a little bit of defense there. Wisdom, of course, is good for our will saves and a couple of skills, but we're limited on skill or abilities here. Lastly, Intelligence is going to be our dump stat, which we lower to an 8 to make sure we have a couple of extra points to boost our stats elsewhere. Now, this array here for these numbers assumes that you have a 25-point buy for your stats. If you're using fewer points or are rolling for stats, then follow this order of importance here. And if I were to make any adjustments or have any wiggle room at all here, you could probably get away with starting off at a strength of 18, or 16 rather, because this is the stat array before we apply any stat bonuses. So, if you really wanted to, you could lower strength and then boost your wisdom score or your dexterity score to make sure you're not falling too far behind in those areas. And then you still have that floating +2 bonus if you're a human to apply to your strength and still get it up to an 18 there. All the way around though, this should offer up some interesting options for you and really lean into the strengths of the Samurai class as a whole. Now then, as far as traits go, there's 3 here that I might recommend. First is Armor Expert. When you wear any armor, reduce the check penalty by 1 to a minimum of 0. Absolutely going to be great, and this is going to be handy for when you are wanting to mitigate any penalties you might have to relevant skill checks, and then still ensuring that you have even a little bit of a bonus coming in, particularly with dexterity related skills. Then, to follow up on boosting areas where we might be a little bit weaker overall, reactionary is going to be a top-notch choice, gaining a +2 trait bonus to your initiative score, which is going to be handy given that we only have a +1 bonus from our dexterity as it is. And then lastly, we have Indomitable Faith, which is going to provide a +1 bonus to will saves. That'll mesh pretty nicely with the dwarf, but it's still going to be good for whatever ancestry option you select for your samurai, because again, will saves are not the samurai's strong suit. Now, overall, when we go towards building the samurai, you have a lot of classic options all the way around, but some interesting things to note is that, first and foremost, while samurai in modern pop culture are renowned for their swordsmanship, their ability to fight in close quarters, and rightly so, they were archers first and foremost. But the way the samurai class is set up overall, they're not really built to capitalize on that historical, traditional sense, because their abilities that provide them a bonus to damage on some certain targets are not applicable to ranged attacks normally, and that would be probably one of the first things I might consider as a DM for homebrewing, making it so that your challenge ability is able to apply to all of that. But we'll get into that a little bit more when we talk about class abilities next time around. But in the meantime, what do you think? Did you like today's video? Did you dislike it? Hit those like or dislike buttons and let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and we'll engage in discussion. And remember, if you're new here to the channel, go on down there, hit the subscribe button, and become a regular member here at the Gamers Den. But with all that said, I've been your host, Jordan, your Master of Lore and Storyteller Extraordinaire. Thank you all so very much for your time, and you all have yourselves a good night.